Hello, everyone, and welcome to Office Hours, where we answer your tech questions 7 days a week. By the way, today is notable. This is our 1,700th daily show. And on behalf of everyone who's participated in Office Hours over the last 4 years, just wanted to take a moment and say thank you for watching and listening and generally supporting our efforts here. We really appreciate it. But it's time for our next show. So now let's get right to your questions. Alexander, what do we have today?
Thanks, Bill. First one this morning is from Douglas Carmichael. I have a Cloud Gateway Max and an Express. What would be a solid choice for a compact NAS that has a similar form factor?
And Jason Bache is going to start us out this morning. Jason?
All right. I'm not sure about compact, but I'd say any of the 18 series from Synology. Synology had a pretty nasty 0 day, but as far as I can tell, as long as you patch it, they were pretty quick to fix it.
All right, nice. Let's dive into our next question.
Clive Kitchener in Souk, British Columbia, Canada is asking, with tariffs coming on just about everything and anything, is anyone doing any preemptive buying or ordering on anything industry-related from cameras to cables?
Jesse Kester, any thoughts?
No, and I'm going to be very careful how I answer this, but it does speak directly to this question. Don't try to predict what's going to happen with the incoming administration. It makes more sense to respond to what actually happens than to run a bunch of simulations.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. Jason Bache, what do you think?
Yeah, I've got to second that. I could not agree more. Don't try to guess. You're not going to be right, and even if you are right, you're going to be wrong more than you'll be right.
Yeah, and things are changing so fast globally in all sorts of areas that a decision you make today might not be the same one you would make in 6 months, 8 months, 2 years, 3 years. I mean, just things change very fast. And so my advice to everybody I've talked to in the last couple of years is just remain agile. Try to understand as much as you can about what affects your bottom line directly and make the best decisions you can, knowing that you're not going to get 100% on everything, hopefully. It'll all work out well, whichever direction things go. Fingers crossed for all of us. Next question.
This one is from Travis Morrison in Perth, Western Australia. Venue only has one available power circuit, ATEM ISO Extrem. Event using Mac to run a clock, HDMI out and buzzer via aux cable to power its speaker. When connecting HDMI to Blackmagic Design SDI converter, sounded like a machine gun. Is this ground looping? Ways to resolve.
Ground loops generally do not sound like machine guns. They tend to sound like hums. And so a traditional ground loop would be a 60 cycle or a 50 cycle if you're in Europe. A hum from that ungrounded potential that's getting into the system. I would look at something else. Now, those kinds of things, it sounds like maybe a switching transient. If it's a really quick, that kind of a sound, and I did a bad impression there. I think you're looking at something else. I think you have to go back to problem solving 101, just to take things out of the loop and know, in the simplest thing, if you take out as much of the auxiliary stuff as you can and get a direct signal coming from your source to where you want to put it out, and that is clean, start adding one thing at a time and see when you connect the thing that makes this happen again. And then you'll at least know what subsystem in your process it might be causing this. Jesse, do you want to dive in with some thoughts?
Yeah, I'm kind of wondering if there's a bit of a clue in the buzzer via auxiliary cable to powered speaker. If there's a line level being interpreted at mic or vice versa somewhere in that chain, which a buzzer... if it's expecting one and getting the other could sound like a machine gun and actually destroy quite a bit of equipment down the line from there if you're doing it wrong.
That is true. A machine gun is not a horrible description of a square wave. So if you are getting a square wave, be really careful about that, because that is essentially the signal going from 0 to 100% very rapidly. And if that's attached to a speaker, if you're hearing it, there's some sort of transducer in the line, and speakers do not like that. That's the quick way to kind of, if the signal has enough amplitude, your speaker will fry. So, definitely pull enough stuff out to make it go away and then gently and carefully add things back in with their levels all at nominal or below nominal, just so you put out as little energy as possible. Travis, get back to us if this doesn't solve it and tell us what you do, and maybe a different panel at a different time. We'll have more of the engineering types on here. We've got some, but not everybody, and maybe we can get even closer to that. Alexander, do you have a thought?
Oh, yeah, because I was just in chat. I should have actually said this earlier. But to me, it sounds like a consistent repeating sound like that. To me, it sounds like a clocking issue. But I've also had power supplies go bad, and I've heard this kind of problem come from power supplies. So those are the two things that I can think of.
Yeah, that actually could be quite a good hint. Power supplies in the modern day are switching power supplies as opposed to anything that lowers the amplitude of the stuff coming in. That means it's switching it on and off so fast that it's hard to perceive any difference. But that's how you dim lights these days. And that could be what's going on. There could be something failing in your power supply. So some areas to look at. Hopefully that helps. Let's go on to our next question.
Paul Valhus in Austin, Texas. Comment how Evercoast uses an asus NUC to deliver a live stream 3D asset with only 300 to 500 milliseconds of lag for real-time interactions for broadcasts or virtual interviews.
He's got a YouTube link there. Did you take a look, Jason?
I did. I'm in the process of it. So here's my comment. That's pretty neat, and it's not really clear how high resolution this appears to be, and that dirty blue screen we just saw says it's a neat thing, but this is exactly what I would expect with kind of 1.0 and nothing but NUC kind of production. It's cool. It's cool for previs. It looks neat. It certainly isn't elaborate. It's super elaborate. As I'm looking at it, rig, it would require quite a bit of post-processing to do anything photorealistic. But neat. I'll give it neat. That's for sure.
Everybody's trying to do the holodeck at Star Trek. They gave us a look at it. Now everybody wants to do a 3D roll around of a human figure. Let's go to our next question.
Mike Edwards in Brooklyn, New York. Morning, everyone. I know it's possible to send to separate screen the preview and program output in Mimolive, but has anyone been able to pop out the other output destinations, for example, live streaming output or recording output?
I don't know enough about Mimolive to dive in there. Oliver Breidenbach, who has been on many times, is the leader of the Mimolive team, and you will see him occasionally hanging out here. He hasn't been on in a while. I know he's working with some of the Office Hours team in terms of building out and helping us build things out. So maybe somebody in the back end do that. Alexander Knight, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, so I use Mimo. I wouldn't consider myself an expert because it's still pretty new to me over the last few months. I don't think there's a way to show a preview of what's actually the recording output. There's no button there in the output destination to actually show you what it looks like, because that's what usually your program output is for. However, there is a button where you can actually turn on a camera multi-view column. So you can see that, and that can be another column inside the main app, or you can pop that out to a completely external one if you want to see a preview of all the different camera sources. So you may want to do that and then throw that on an external monitor if you have a free output on the computer that you're using.
Okay, Mike, hope that helps you. Let's go on to our next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I'm working on my Dante Level 3 certification. Any advice from people who have taken the course before? I've been Level 2 certified for a few years.
And what I know about Dante will fit into a thimble with room left over for a slug of something. I want you to know that, unfortunately, you just hit one of those days when there's nobody who's a Dante level expert here. We have them in the group. So this may be a good time to head for the Discord and see if somebody in one of the help forums there might know more about that. There are more people, I think, who participate there every day than come into the panel. And this is one of those things, as most of you know, we are in the process of just doing first hours over the course of this week and probably the rest of the month because Alex is working on a whole bunch of back-end stuff. So the panels are going to be a little bit thinner, which means one thing, your questions we can get to quicker. We won't have the breadth of knowledge that sometimes we do here, but your questions can be gotten to faster, which means that if you have questions today, toss them in. If not, the show will run as long as we have questions, and then we will bid you adieu at that point. Alexander, you had another thought?
Yeah, just to bring in Mickey's comment here in the chat was saying that it might be a good time to revisit level 1, level 2 because they've refreshed them recently.
Oh, okay. So there's new stuff. I guess that makes sense. Dante is obviously something that is a huge topic of information. I'm just checking what Mickey said. Yeah, no, I agree. I think that makes sense. Ryan Thompson also says Audinate does live classes for each level 3 or 4 times a year. So I think you can get to the video on demand part of their thing. So maybe check out the Audinate website and see if there's a path down there that you can watch some content and get your skills refreshed. Hopefully that helps. Zach, next question.
Paul Vahus in Austin, Texas, comment on how this Apple AirTag feature will help you track production gear even more effectively.
Jason, start us out.
Well, it doesn't actually help you track more effectively. It just allows you to share things. So, for example, if an airline loses your bag, you can tell the airline and kind of make it their problem and not be the middleman, so to speak, for the tracking. It doesn't really change anything. It just makes it easier for you to kind of share that one piece of lost thing with other trusted third parties.
That makes sense. Yeah. I know it's been frustrating to me to have to go do it myself if something gets lost in a situation like that, in an airport or something like that, because often people don't want to talk to you about it. Jesse Kester.
This is the right answer. The wrong answer was when airlines were saying that AirTags were not allowed in checked luggage because of this exact issue and people embarrassing them publicly by broadcasting where the item was. This is how you handle that issue. I'm very glad it's moving in this direction.
This has been transformative for me and for a lot of people who I think I'm up to 6 or 7 AirTags now in my life. And for, I don't have a huge family going around and doing things, and I don't have tons of stuff. I stay pretty close to my production facility and just a few other places, but it's been really nice to know that those little, I dropped my bike off not long ago and there's an AirTag on my bike. And as soon as I left, it said, "You've left your bike behind." Yes, well, I knew this time, but if I hadn't, that would be really useful. Next question.
This one is from Jesse Kester here on the panel from Glendale. We got a call to support a live stream out in a field. They said we can plug HDMI into their LiveView. I'm not confident in this solution, and I'm looking for Hotspot solutions as a backup. What do you recommend?
Jesse, you wanted to answer your own question or at least expand on it a little bit more?
Yeah. Just want to give a little bit of context. So what we're working with is there's a firefighter company and, whatever you call it. Not the Office or Department of Firefighters. Anyway, we're out in Ventura County. They're doing a memorial service for fallen firefighters. And they said they just wanted like a little bit of support to help them get across the finish line with their stream this year because all their firefighters are really busy out in the field because of the wildfires. So they called us in. The broadcast is on Wednesday. We are definitely going with our standard kit, which is a couple of cameras and ATEM. We'd love to go Ethernet out from the ATEM with a stream key into something like a Starlink or whatever. We don't really know. We haven't done this field broadcast yet, this type of work yet. So we're just kind of looking for any suggestions on what you would rent and take out to a field. We're about 300 yards from any connections. So we're pretty far out there. So there's no HDMI. We could do an SDI feed into their actual offices and then pull Ethernet from there. But they'd rather have us and the equipment near the actual memorial service so that they can be giving feedback and communicating with us efficiently throughout the broadcast. That's the general shape of it. And I'm wondering if anyone has any any ideas or suggestions on gear that I should be using for this very experimental stream? And it's also low risk. They said, like, just bring whatever you can, do whatever you can, make it better than what we would do without you, and we're going to be happy type situation.
Oh, that's nice. That's always a good kind of client. Plus, you're lucky that you're in Los Angeles, which is the largest city in the country. Or I don't know whether it or New York is technically, but one of the largest, certainly. You will have tons and tons of resources available. So if anybody knows someone who does LiveView or Starlink or anything like that, temporary setups, ping Jesse or dive into the Discord. Are you in the Discord, Jesse?
Absolutely, yes. I am frequently lurking in the corners.
Okay. Well, then take a flashlight, find Jesse in whatever corner he's in, and ping him if you know of somebody in the Los Angeles area who might be able to help him with this for our public service people. It's a great thing to be able to help. Let's go on to our next question.
Travis Morrison in Perth, Western Australia is asking, business question, when asked by other production companies that don't know live streaming, where do you draw the line between sharing your knowledge in the interest of collaboration over competition and being careful to not give away your IP?
Alexander, start us out. How do you feel about this?
I haven't run into this situation with another competing business, but my 2 cents, I'm fair. I like helping out people as much as I can, especially friends and stuff like that. But if a customer is coming to me and asking me about live streaming, if I can't do it or I don't have the time, I really recommend them to not attempt to try to do it themselves with zero knowledge and experience. Live streaming, doing it right is hard, and you have to have the equipment, you have to have the knowledge. There's a lot of pieces involved in getting it right. And they should hire somebody that knows how to do it. So I would probably not be too happy about a company that doesn't know live streaming coming to me and talking to me about how to do it, because I can't give them a quick and easy answer on how to do this. In fact, not exactly this scenario, but I ran into something with a client of mine recently who pays me to produce content for him. And so one of the things that I do is I cut short form clips from longer form content for social media. And I don't think this was malicious at all, but a friend of his who was actually a guest on this one episode decided that he wanted to kind of learn how to cut clips, and he took the content and he started making clips, and he started sending me examples and asking me for advice. And I said, look, I can't do this. Like, I'm being paid. This is my livelihood. I'm being paid to do this. First of all, like, it's amateur. You have no experience. You don't have the content set up in the right format. Like, I can't do this. I can't spend hours with you teaching you how to do editing and what I've done, that it's taken me years to do. So I just can't do it.
Jesse Kester, your thoughts?
Oh, don't even worry about competition. Answer every question that's asked completely, but only answer the question that's asked, but do it completely. The more information you give, nobody ever assumes like, oh wow, he shoveled all the information that I needed. I assume he has no more information in his brain and he has no value to us anymore. It is the opposite of that. The more information you give, the more people assume you have more information beyond that. And it only benefits you to share as much as you can about your pipeline, about how you tie things together, about how you approach production philosophically. Give as much as you can. If there's a concern about time against money, that's when you start slowing down. Like if you're typing 3 hours of emails a week to answer these questions, and not getting paid for it, then that's when you might not have to tamp it down, just because like you have a business to run. But give as much information as you can within the context of the questions being asked.
Jason Bache.
Yeah, my philosophy is pretty much the same. If I can answer your question while driving down the street, I will do that straight away. It is just simple, good business to be able to, if for no other reason, practice what you do. And speaking it is a really great way to continue to kind of hone your own craft. To say it more succinctly is a really good thing. So if the words that I say can allow you to do it for free, you're never going to forget that. If I cut you off, you're also never going to forget that. It's that simple.
Interesting questions. Oh, Jesse, you wanted to get back in?
Yeah, Jason, you just jogged my memory on something else. That if you really want to know something, teach it to someone else. Like if you really want to know what you're talking to, you better run it through that stress test of explaining it to someone who doesn't get it.
Absolutely. I've had the same exact experience. We had a lot of input on this from the Q&A system today, or from the chat. Let's see. Mickey said, we fully collaborate and are completely open to other vendors that some may consider our competition. All boats rise with the tide. And there is a lot of truth in that in my experience. If things go badly, a lot of the times they don't come to a different vendor. They just stop doing things, and that doesn't help anyone. David Brady said, teach a man to fish, but charge them for the lessons. Let's see. That's not about this thread. The competition or cutting clients seems like some people expect a medical degree to be considered to be condensed into a 30-minute course of study. That's kind of the way I've seen this forever. Your reputation, you're balancing your reputation versus a certain amount of protectionism. I think every time I can answer a question for somebody successfully and help them out, it improves my reputation in the community because people do talk. And if you get the reputation as being someone who can solve problems efficiently, that's a pretty valuable thing today when there is so much global competition. Your reputation, every time you have a chance to polish it by helping somebody, I think it does you a world of good for yourself. Those people who will try to do it themselves, I mean, I think everybody on this panel who's been in the business for a long time understands it wasn't just the knowledge. I mean, knowledge, pure factual knowledge and how to do things knowledge, it's all over the internet now, and everybody has access to it from their pockets. It is never the knowledge itself that has the value. It's the wisdom you've accumulated over the years in application of that knowledge, knowing when it effectively solves problems and when you're going down the wrong path. You're applying the knowledge, but you don't quite know how to apply the knowledge to get the result, and things don't go well. And things fail, and you don't have that depth to understand, oh, yeah, I ran across this 2 years ago in another implementation of the same idea, and this was the problem, so I can fix that now. That's the stuff that you never can get across to somebody in that 10-minute phone call. Here's the quickest place to look for the answer, or here's how I solved it once upon a time, see if that works for you. Those things have always been part of what I do and kind of why I was on office hours in the early days and still am here. I just like doing that sharing. I think it makes everything easier, and it makes people happy to see you when you show up and say hi to them in real life. Let's move on to the next question.
Zach Stallsmith in Chautauqua, New York. I'm looking to upgrade security on my home network. What are some good options that everyone is using?
Alexander, you want to dive into this?
Yeah, just a quick thing. I'm by no means a network or security expert, but usually what I suggest to people is, this is something I did myself not too long ago, is just get rid of the whatever modem/router your ISP delivered to you, because even something reasonably priced like a Ubiquiti router would suit you a lot better. They're a lot more professional, have a lot more features and monitoring and logging and all that sort of stuff. You can create VLANs if you need to, all that sort of stuff that, a lot of times these consumer grade routers that your ISP is providing you is going to be fairly limited. So like, for example, in my setup, I'm running a Ubiquiti Edge router, and I absolutely love it. And it only does that one thing. And I have a separate access point that only does Wi-Fi, which is also a Ubiquiti product. So I've been pretty happy with that.
Jason Bass, your thoughts?
Yeah, I'll expand on that a little bit. That monolith that you got from your ISP is not one thing. It's not the modem everyone calls it. It is a gateway, which means it takes a single IP address and it turns, whether it's a phone line or coaxial cable, it doesn't matter, into a single IP address. It's a router, which means it takes that single IP address and then it turns it into an internal series of IP addresses. And then it is a wireless access point, which means it takes that same thing with Ethernet and it does it via Wi-Fi. It does none of those things well. It was built by the lowest bidder, and it does not respond to your commands. It responds to the ISP's commands. So just remember that and realize that, one of the very best things you can do is replace your gateway and get a real router.
There you go.
Doing panels, film rollouts, music gigs, etc. at South by Southwest in March, and do you plan on attending?
I don't know of anything. Paul Wallace, who's here many times, I know has been deeply involved in South by Southwest. I don't know whether he's behind the scenes or he's just done things with it, but he's been talking to us about it the entire 4+ years we've been here, and I know he knows a lot of the people who are there. We had the person who runs South by Southwest on a show was it 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago? Not long after the pandemic kind of resolved itself, he came on the show as South by Southwest was coming up. So you might want to search out in our archives and learn a little bit about that way. I don't know of anybody who's more connected than Paul. Jesse, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, this is not the answer you're looking for, I imagine, but I do have some friends who have, like a short film or something in South by Southwest, but because work has been so slow for the last 6 to 12 months, they just can't afford to go out there along with their film. So it's kind of, there's some hearts breaking over here in Los Angeles right now over that.
Yeah, I think that's going to be pretty, there's been a lot of contraction in the entire Los Angeles and California production industry since the pandemic, and I don't think anybody feels like it's come back the way it was. There's kind of a reinvention going on out there, so I don't know what South by Southwest is going to be like this year. We'll have to see, and it won't be too long until we can tell, but let's go to our next question.
Jim Brooks in New York is asking, in a podcast like Joe Rogan, what is the benefit of the host and guest wearing headphones if they are at the same table speaking to one another? Thanks.
Oh, lots. Jesse, dive in.
The biggest benefit, I did an interview show for like 100 episodes or something like that. And the biggest benefit we found of putting the headphones on is your interviewee is even more locked into the conversation because it just is constantly like right in there massaging their ears. You want the audio in their headphones to sound really good, have a nice warm feel to it so that they're just getting this audio massage for the entire conversation, and they're not paying attention to things, like a garbage truck outside or something like that. It just locks them in that much better, and you really get to kind of, as you massage the brain, you're kind of like massaging answers out of them using headphones as a, not a crutch, but as an assistance tool.
I'm going to remember that phrase, massaging questions out of them. Alexander Knight, your thoughts?
Yeah, there's lots of reasons. And as a audio engineer, one of the biggest things I find is that when people don't have experience with being on a microphone, they'll generally have poor mic technique. So they're going to go like this, they're going to go off axis, and you can't hear yourself without some kind of monitoring. So I always tell people, and I coach people, put headphones on. Okay, now keep talking. Now put the headphones on. Now, do you see the difference? You can hear what happens, right? When you go off axis, my voice just disappears. So I find that helps them kind of stay locked into that microphone, that sweet spot of where they need to be. And of course, there's also lots of reasons too. In certain higher level productions, like maybe you have a technical director or someone that needs to whisper in your ear, like on this show. Maybe you're in a production where there's comms and you need to hear important information. While having some kind of monitoring is probably a good idea for that. So there's a lot of good reasons, and also with podcasts and, with Joe Rogan, I know he plans for that. I'm not a big fan of having big cans on your head. But any kind of monitoring is good, in-ear monitors. It's really hard. I have a client just a couple of times wore headphones and he doesn't like it. It's so hard to get some people to put him on. And, sometimes with clients, if they just say no, like I can't force them to wear it.
All good reasons. You've heard a lot of things. I used to do one of the lectures I used to do regularly when I was on the road for Videomaker Magazine as one of their contributing editors. I used to do a piece called Why Audio is So Important. And one of my things was I'd say, I've got my camera here and my wife wanted me to record a little of this. Can somebody volunteer from the audience to come up and just shoot something? You don't have to do anything. It's all set up for you. And I would get a volunteer out of the audience and I would hand them the camcorder. I say, oh, wait a second. I got to make one more thing. And I take a piece of tape and I put it over the little viewfinder and I put another piece of tape over the display of what the camera was shooting. And I said, here, go ahead and shoot. I'm sorry, you can't look at what not. I'm trying to make a point. You would never, ever, ever go out to shoot video without being able to see what you're shooting. Yet for some reason, people are willing to create audio without listening to the result of the audio they're creating. It makes no sense to me whatsoever. And this is another one of those circumstances. There are some edge cases where you might have a interviewee who is so sensitive that the idea of putting them in headphones in front of a microphone shuts them down a little. And you have to be sensitive to that, because maybe a couple of people on the couch who feel like it's more a conversation will get you the right feeling out of the interview. There's not a lot of that going around. Most generations, for the past couple of generations, have had cameras and microphones and stuff like that as just part of their world. They've watched this behind the scenes on television so much that I'm finding almost nobody is intimidated now by a microphone in their face. They're just used to it as part of their regular day-to-day lives. So you don't have that problem that I was discussing earlier. So outside of a particular interviewee who is sensitive, I would say just always make sure you can hear yourself, and also that your guest, if you're in an interviewee or a panel situation, can truly understand what is happening. And if nothing else, if you want it to look like a casual conversation, do what all the pros do, a little IFB, but something exactly like Alexander said, where the people who are running the show can get cues and things to the people on the live recording and let them know what's going on in the background. Jason, you had some follow-up thoughts?
Over the years, you knocked something loose in my head, Bill. Over the years of getting people on the air that really had never, ever been on the air. I did a show for many, many years that was internet only, called ADHD Radio, and we brought comics. We brought stand-up comics on, and these were as amateur as they came and had never been in a studio. Nobody ever pushed back for headphones. In fact, people really like them because it gives them this professional feel, and it allows them to do that thing that they really can never do on stage, which is actually hear how they're sounding. So I think it's a pretty good thing.
Yeah, and as someone who's done a couple hundred on-camera interviews with people as the interviewer, 90% of the job is getting them to relax and be human and directly talk to you, as opposed to feeling like they're on the spot and the interview is starting now and, oh gosh, everything I'm saying is going on the record. So you learn a lot of little tricks to try to settle people down. I find in this era, there's much, much less of that. Everybody I interview is pretty comfortable with the process. I don't think there are very many people out there who haven't been interviewed at some point, at least under 50, who hasn't participated in some corporate thing or work thing, or is online as we are after hours and doing their own podcasting or whatever. There's just a lot of that going on. So it's much easier today than it used to be. Let's dive into the next question.
This one's from the QR code Francis Fry in Cambridge, Massachusetts. This SLIK clamp, which allows me to easily slide things up and down with a tiny footprint, has been a lifesaver, but I am moving to a desk that is 3.5 inches thick, and this only goes up to 3 inches. Do you know of alternatives?
Ooh, okay. Let's dive into this. Jason, do you know what they're looking at?
Okay, so let me start here. This is a very cool thing that I've seen variants of, but I've never actually seen this particular one. So what it is basically is just a really large clamp and then an extension. It looks like the top piece of a tripod, except it's backwards. So, that clamp is designed to go on, I think it's farther down, there it is. So it's designed to go on to a thing and to hold up a small digital camera. Now, my advice you're not going to like, which is separate your camera from your desk. I want you to use this. I want you to keep using this because I think it's a really neat piece of kit. But I don't think it should be in the studio with you. I think that should be in your camera bag. That should be, you are using it exactly the way that it should be used, which is in the field, impromptu, go get the shot and use it. But I think you should put up a separate table or attach your camera to a light, attach it to anything aside from the desk. I am highly ADD, and my feet are always kind of like rumbling when I'm not standing. If I were to attach the camera to my desk, it would constantly be moving. So even if you don't have that problem, I don't think that SLIK clamp should be what you use in your studio.
There you go. And for me, as soon as I saw that, I said, oh, doesn't open wide enough? That's a job for a Cardellini. And for those of you who aren't grip aware, this is a Cardellini clamp, and they come in different lengths, and you can get one of these that's a foot long. So there is no parallel flat surfaces that a Cardellini will not officially and robustly grab onto. And then you can certainly take the baby pin that's on the end of a Cardellini and use a little socket of some kind and adapt it to any other device that you have ever needed to mount. So if you just simply want something that's going to be able to grab a bigger thing. And Matthews makes one, they call theirs Mathelinis, but this was invented a long time ago, and there's lots of these out there. So find something that has a bigger jaw ratio. Let's go to the next question.
From the QR code, Chester Sweeney in Las Vegas, Nevada. Is there a router I can get just to run Ethernet internet to my M1 Mac Mini, a router with just Ethernet and no Wi-Fi capabilities?
Alexander Knight.
Well, I feel like this dovetails nicely with a previous question that was asked about routers. Because once you get away from the supplied hardware from your ISP, which will always have Wi-Fi into it, then it really opens yourself up to a massive market of options. And again, I will say I'm using a Ubiquiti Edge router. That's all it does. There's no Wi-Fi. I had to add a Unify Wi-Fi access point to get the Wi-Fi capability, and I'd rather keep those things separate. So that's just one brand. I'm not saying you have to get Ubiquiti, but that is one perfect example right there.
Thank you, Alexander. Moving on to the next question.
Danny Grizzle in Longview, Texas. Anybody use a stacking toolbox as an audio cart? Between last week's office hours tip about Kaizen foam and this guy's video, I've caught a serious fever.
A stacking toolbox as an audio cart. I didn't see that last week, and I'm sorry I didn't because it sounds interesting. Let's see. Jason has some thoughts on it.
Okay,
Jason?
yeah, I'm totally at fault for that. So no, I don't use them in production, but I do have a few of these, and by a few I mean just probably thousands of dollars worth of this kind of thing. No, I don't use them on set. I don't use them in production, but I do use them when I'm doing my tech work, when I'm doing network build-ins and basically anything that requires my tools. I find that they are very, very, very handy because nobody likes making a dozen trips to their car and back. It is a colossal pain in the butt. I like Milwaukee Packout, and I'm trying to remember the other ones. They're both very expensive. I think the other ones came from DeWalt. The problem with them is once they get past a certain height, they're not exactly, let's just say, easy to move because they get very, very, very heavy. That said, I wouldn't have bought thousands of dollars worth of them if they weren't useful. And yes, the Kaizen foam that I showed on Friday is supremely cool.
Jesse Kester.
It's an interesting build. I can't imagine using it myself, a hybrid shelving / desk unit, because when I'm in desk mode on production, I'm sitting, and if I can't put my knees under the desk, then I'm not going to straddle some standing desk in a weird way for 8 hours a day on set while I'm monitoring or something like that. The upside of a project like this is the build never ends. You're always tweaking it and adjusting things. If you want a hobby that will take you through the next 20 years, build your own mobile desk with drawers and all the bits of gear right where you want them, and then change it and rebuild it every month, and you'll never, ever, ever get bored.
Yeah, I have to admit, audio carts are a thing of beauty when and you go on a large scale set and look at what the audio team is using out there. They're pretty amazingly customized. I will say the one thing I always use, my question is, am I just using this in offices? Is that my practice? I go to people's offices and I do things, or am I ever in a field shoot? Because in any kind of field shoot situation, the serious carts have wheel options, often that you can take off one set of wheels. Let's say you have the hard floor casters on. You can pop those off on serious rigs and put almost like bicycle wheels because you have to get over really rough ground. People who shoot on sand, if you're doing a lot of beach work, they have big inflatable beach tires that you can put on the bottom of sound carts, and that gets you across that thing without having to lug the cart through there. So that's one of my kind of keys as I'm looking at somebody's mobile rig. Can you tell the serious playing professionals, because they will have faced these kinds of edge case scenarios and found ways to solve them. And that always tells me, I've got somebody who's been around for a while and really knows what they're doing. When I see those balloon tires on beach carts, I go, yeah, all right, the guy I hired definitely has been around the block a few times. Next question.
From the QR code, Chester Sweeney's back from Las Vegas, Nevada. Is there an app on the iPhone that uses the camera on the iPhone for seeing infrared vision?
Jason Bache.
No, but there are some really, really cool cameras that you can plug in. FLIR makes nearly all of them for iOS, and they work really, really well and are supremely cool. But no, as far as any way to get thermal out of the iPhone camera, I'm unaware of that.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen anything. There are inexpensive ones, as Jason is talking about, and that forward-looking infrared. I was first introduced to that decades ago when I was doing work for McDonnell Douglas, and their Apache attack helicopters had a whole platoon of people surrender to the helicopter because they were so scared of them because they could see in the dark. We've come a long way, and that technology has become far, far, far less expensive over the course of those years than it used to be. And I have seen inexpensive, literally under $100 versions of that. I don't think they're anywhere near as precise and accurate as the mil-spec ones that I saw. But yeah, take a look around, look for infrared camera, and you should be able to find some options there, even maybe on eBay or Amazon or wherever. Let's go to our next question.
This one's for me. Can anyone on the panel recommend a very high-quality single mono in-ear monitor? My client does not want both in his ears. I suppose he could just wear one, but I prefer a single cable with one earpiece.
Okay, I'm trying to find the ones that I use, but in the interim, yes, I'm trying to get on my Amazon account because I bought a bunch of these. I've used for a long time simple stereo to mono collapsing single track earbuds, and I don't know if I look in my history whether I can pull one up really quickly and show it to you. They aren't very expensive, and remember, in most of these cases, what you're trying to do is basically hear well enough for human speech. You don't need anything more complicated than that. Let me see if I type earbud into my Amazon search history. That should come up with something you can actually see. I've used various ones over the course. Here we go. Far End is what I used to use pretty consistently. That's what they look like. They terminate in a 3.5 millimeter stereo plug. The stereo gets some to mono inside it. It's got a reinforced cord. I found these things very useful. They're about $20, so they don't cost a lot. In fact, the biggest hassle I always have was taking the output of whatever my sound source was, usually a 1/4 inch, maybe mono, maybe stereo plug, and adapting it down so that this could plug into it. It's not a problem on something like if you're doing your monitoring off a laptop. It will work just fine with most laptop sound sources, but I've used these and they work just fine. I did change to more complicated and more professional things, the in-ear monitors and things like that. But I did that purely for the fact that they're very small and very hideable. They're in the classification of security earphones for walkie-talkies and things like that. You often see those higher-end ones, which run about $200, maybe $225, used by Secret Service and people like that, where it just, there's no reason for it to fail. The cables are kind of armored, and unless somebody really rips at it, they're pretty indestructible. But for simple little things, I use those far end ones I think in the beginning of this show, that was what I was using for an IEM, and it worked just fine. So there you go. Hopefully that'll help. Next question.
Douglas Carmichael says, what would you think of using a Protectli, or that's a weird word, or similar mini PC and building one's own router using FreeBSD or Linux? pfSense is just a customized version of FreeBSD with a web UI.
Well, there you go. Jason Bache, you're our resident hacker for this kind of stuff. Tell me what you got.
Okay, that's a little reductionist. You're not wrong. But at the same time, what you want when you are making a router is an extremely incapable machine. Or let me say that differently. An extremely capable machine within an extremely narrow scope of, of things. So if you like doing this and you decide that this is really what you want to do, I would start with, like an easy thing, like a Raspberry Pi. See if you can turn it into a router that, that makes you happy. See if you can get it to work. See if you can get it to get throughput that is acceptable to you. If you want to continue getting a PC to do this, yes, is entirely possible. But wow, you're going to end up learning a lot more than I think you want to.
Next question.
Next question is from me. What Blackmagic Design HDMI to SDI converter do I need to get these signals into an SDI switcher?
Jesse Kester, you want to help him out?
I'm not going to go Blackmagic Design, but what we use for pretty much all of that are these decimators, and we use... Oh, sorry, temporarily out of stock. Never mind. But we use mountains of them. Maybe we're the ones who bought them all up because we use so many of them when we're doing a show.
You're not alone. Every big production company that I know that comes and does even hotel ballroom stuff has probably a dozen, if not 20 of those somewhere in the back because they're so useful for transcoding signal types and doing the rest of that. Hopefully that helped. Next question.
Craig Kadoki in Toronto, Canada. Is there anything I should know about the Blackmagic Design Web Presenter 4K before a team orders one for streaming out of venues? We're using an ATEM 4K Studio.
Jason Bache, help him out.
I don't have the 4K, but I bought a pair of the 1080s right when they came out. I mean, you're really going to like it. And if you're familiar with the way that the interface works, which is nearly identical to the way that the Blackmagic switchers that do broadcast, the ATEM minis, I think you're not really going to have any problems. Make sure you have at least one additional monitor because the interface that they use is extremely useful. It will actually decode almost the entirety of the SDI, like the metadata. It is extremely cool. So no, nothing right offhand. Be sure to update them. The firmware updates are really important.
By the way, for those of you who are really interested in that mono earphone thing, there's been a large discussion in our regular Mukana chat about it. So if you're on that, Mickey's last suggestion was allclaire.com product single-sided IEM cable. So I guess there's cables and there's earbuds, and there was actually a pretty robust discussion about what people use and why. So there you go. Next question.
Another one for me. Has anyone tested inexpensive small monitor brands like Feelworld or Viltrox that have scopes? How do I know those scopes on a $200 monitor are accurate?
I have not used any of those. I generally pull up scopes on my regular monitors, and for me, since I do most of my post-production work in Final Cut, I've learned to rely on those. I will say this. I think the algorithms for turning signals into common display scopes are pretty well known now. So I'm not, somebody would have to do some pretty bad engineering not to be able to take some of those libraries for turning, an audio thing into a sine wave or some kind of display and get it terribly wrong. Jason Bache raised his hand. So Jason, do you know more?
Sure. So, I mean, I've gone all the way down this particular hole. And so, you start with a cheap thing and you think to yourself, okay, well, is this going to be different? And what I settled on was using software scopes like Scopebox, and I will run the same thing through it, and I will check it And if it is the same, I also have used the hardware ones in the past, but as long as it's accurate once to something that I trust, I tend to trust it over and over again.
Yeah, I think the same thing. You know, it used to be back in the days of me starting in my career, the big tectonic oscilloscopes that were, 20 inches high and giant things just to do a round display. It was complicated to break down signals. This is all done digitally now. And I would guess once the algorithms have been set, probably, I don't know if they were proprietary in the early days, but they're pretty common now. And I see scopes in all the prominent software. I see them in a lot of other tools like these small monitors that have scopes overlaid on them. And just in the back of my mind, I'm thinking that's got to be just an algorithm running back there. Probably that they had a good software engineer, either reverse engineer, or these are just standard code blocks that you can patch together to put up something like a vector scope or a waveform monitor, one of the traditional video production scopes that we all rely on every day for field shooting and the rest. So I don't think there's anything kind of hidden about it. Maybe some people are trust or not, but I think Jason's got it right. If you have some good scope that is reliable and testable, or if you've used one and you check the software implementation against that and it turns out to be accurate, that code is not going to change over the course of the time, so maybe that should be enough. All right. We're going to end just a tiny bit early today, but that's fine. As you know, we are testing a lot of things in the back end, so we're going to be doing shows every day. We, as always, run on your questions, so if you want more time to ask questions, you've got it. The panel will be here every day doing our best to answer all of your questions. I think the audio guys are coming in on Wednesday, and they're doing kind of a more standard audio show, but for right now, the back end is doing a lot of testing. In fact, I saw in one of the chats there that we had a few glitches in this thing as the back end is rerouting things and putting things together. If so, sorry, but we are trying our best to continually move into the future. One last thing I wanted to mention before we finish up the show is if you'd like to support what we do here on Office Hours as we grow into the next iteration of this program, you can help us out by going to officehours.globo/donate, I think it is. Is it donate? I should have it up in front of me, and I don't. But you can contribute and get an Office Hours t-shirt. We are not looking at an inexpensive or cheap t-shirt. We have a very nice one, and a significant portion of the overall cost above the t-shirt is going to help us continue this experiment in learning how streaming video works and sharing what we learn with anyone and everyone who wants to come by and play every day. My huge and heartfelt thank you to all of our panelists today. Thank you very much, Jesse and Jason and Alexander, for taking your time here to toss out information and help everybody with their questions. We will be here every day until we can't. And as I said, today is our 1700th direct show that we've done without missing a day. We've done it 7 days a week. We will continue to until the first day that somebody doesn't show up. And I'm actually personally kind of hoping you stick with us through this little transitional period, because there's a lot of things we want to do. And when everybody gets up and puts in this volunteer time, it's a huge deal. We want to thank them for doing that. The Tulloch Traversal today, we traveled 49,000 miles. That's 79,000 kilometers, or 388 million bananas for scale. We'll see you tomorrow.
Consider yourselves warned. 48 hours left for the shirts.
Oh, boy.
Good one.
But
Good show.
I got an email. The shirts have hit their minimum number, and they are going into production.
Yes,
Wonderful.
I got the same response. So,
And then it'll be a game of, who gets them first. Like when the first one lands, we'll know, because the next day on Office Hours.
that's right. Somebody will have a logo right here, and it'll be the new logo.
Question is, are these shirts going to be machine washable safe, or do I have to hand wash it delicately?
Alex was pretty adamant about it. He took some time figuring out the right shirt and the right vendor, and to the point
these
where
won't be junk.
Yeah, to the point where it's kind of interesting. Everybody overseas, if you're not in the U.S., I think you're having to go through Nigel, because Nigel is willing to volunteer to reship them to you, and there wasn't, from this particular vendor, there wasn't a global